Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. As drone pilots in Canada, one thing we must absolutely be able to do is to read and understand CFS charts, Canada Flight Supplement charts. Let's get into it. Canada Flight Supplements are official aviation documents published by NAV Canada. But why would a drone pilot care what's in the CFS? Well, firstly, CFS entries identify the official aerodrome status, certified, registered, or military. Certified aerodromes are no-fly zones for basic RPAS pilots, and advanced RPAS pilots require permission to fly near them. Registered aerodromes are lesser aerodromes, and while both basic and advanced pilots are permitted to fly near them, caution is advised. Military aerodromes are no-fly zones for basic pilots, and advanced pilots require a Special Flight Operations Certificate, or SFOC, to fly within 3 nautical miles. The CFS will tell you what kind of aerodrome you're dealing with, so you will be able to manage your drone operation properly. Secondly, if and when you need to contact an aerodrome, the CFS will identify who to contact and phone and radio frequencies to use, either to ask permission to fly nearby or in the event of an emergency, such as a flyaway. Lastly, information in the CFS provides runway directions, the location of obstacles, and procedural information that will all help you to understand manned aircraft flight patterns, so you can stay out of their way. The Drone Pilot Canada app shows you up-to-date key information about each aerodrome, with further CFS details available via SkyVector. You can also purchase CFS publications directly from NAV Canada or through various distributors. There is one CFS entry for every registered, certified, or military land aerodrome in Canada. Aerodromes that are not registered or are abandoned or defunct do not have CFS entries. The CFS document set is updated every 56 days. There is a corresponding water aerodrome supplement that lists all registered and certified water aerodromes, and it is published once a year. We're going to walk through the CFS entry for the Sudbury, Ontario Airport, shown here, as a typical listing. In doing so, I'm going to be focusing on elements and information that is pertinent to drone pilots, and in particular, elements that may appear in either the basic or advanced RPAS pilot certificate exams. If you would like a soft copy of the material I present in this video, I've updated my study guide for the Canadian RPAS Advanced Operation Pilot Exam to incorporate this new material. There's a link to this PDF in the description below the video if you wish to purchase this study guide. Now, if you've already purchased the Advanced Operations Study Guide, you can download the updated material for no additional charge. The format for each aerodrome follows the same pattern, with some variations for major airports where additional details are provided. There are 3 basic areas: an identification area, an aerodrome sketch, and details, broken down into subheadings. Let's walk through each of these 3 areas. The identification area is pretty easy to understand. There's a heading showing the CFS document number and its effective date, remembering that it gets updated every 56 days. There's the aerodrome name and province in red characters, and on the right-hand side, the ICAO code, commonly referred to as the airport code. The Aerodrome Sketch area varies in size, again depending upon the importance of the airport, but the Sudbury case is pretty typical. The Aerodrome Sketch is an attempt to represent what the airport would look like in a visual sense from a manned aircraft. The predominant features on the Aerodrome Sketch, of course, are the runways, shown here in dark, and they will vary in terms of how they are portrayed based on the material. In this case, they're asphalt, and so they're dark black. You'll also see buildings, you'll see trees, and you can see deciduous versus coniferous trees, and key things such as obstacles, there's towers, you'll see wind socks showing, and buildings. In the top left of the chart is the aerodrome elevation in feet above sea level. The runways will be shown with their length and the runway numbers at each end, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And also on the Aerodrome Sketch is this mysterious thing called an obstacle clearance circle, or OCC. We're going to talk about this in a few slides because it's quite important to understand and not at all obvious what it really means. A quick reminder about runway numbering. Runways are numbered between 01 and 36 based upon the runway's heading. In other words, the heading used by an aircraft, whether it be landing or taking off on it. And of course, the same physical runway has two numbers depending upon the direction being used. So there's the 422 runway and the 1230 runway in the case of Sudbury. The runway number is in so-called decadegrees. So at 04, for example, in the case of Sudbury, refers to 40 degrees. And that heading is magnetic in the southern domestic area of Canada and true direction in the northern domestic area, which is roughly the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. The symbols used on the Aerodrome Sketch are the same as on VFR charts. So I've reproduced a very abbreviated version of the legend here for some of the key things that you might want to be able to pick off of one of these charts. Probably the most important thing to recognize is that unless otherwise specified, all elevations are in feet above sea level. They are not above ground level, they're above sea level. So if you see, for example, a tower that is listed as 1180 feet here, that means the top of that tower is 1180 feet above sea level. Okay, let's talk about this obstacle clearance circle. The number in the middle of the circle is the altitude 1,000 feet higher than the tallest obstacle within the radius of the circle. I'll repeat that. The number in the middle of the circle is the altitude 1,000 feet higher than the tallest obstacle within the radius of the circle. If you're in a manned aircraft, you should be well above any ground obstacle as long as you're at least at this altitude. Now, if you look carefully at the diagram, the tallest identified item in this case is a tower with elevation 1,215 feet ASL, which means it is only about 72 feet above the ground, since the aerodrome elevation itself is 1,143 feet ASL. Pause the video, do the math, and you'll see what I mean. Now, they do round up the OCC altitude to the nearest 100 feet. The radius of the OCC is shown around the top rim in nautical miles. In this case, it is 7 nautical miles. This radius will correspond to the lowest level control zone for the airport, in this case a Class E control zone. Now, as I illustrate here, the OCC, the blue line, is at 2,500 feet, the number in the middle of the circle on the sketch, but the Class E control zone itself actually goes up to 4,000 feet above sea level. So there's a lot of information that is packed into this one corner of the aerodrome chart. And believe me, it's not at all obvious how to interpret all of this. So I hope this helps. Here's another example. And I mention this other example because not all aerodromes have control zones. So here's a very small aerodrome, no control zone, but it still has an OCC that's identified here. And the OCC radius is simply identified as radius 5 nautical miles. The obstacle clearance circle altitude is 1,600 feet, 1,000 feet higher than the tallest obstacle, again rounded up to the nearest 100 feet. There's no obstacles at all particularly noted on this particular chart, so the tallest obstacle must be around 300 feet AGL, because the aerodrome elevation is 254 feet. So if we do all the math, that would mean that the OCC comes out at about 1,600 feet ASL. Now let's get into the detail section of the CFS. In every one of these entries, it follows the same basic pattern. Again, there's going to be more or less detail depending on the size of the airport, but they follow the same pattern, and they have mysterious abbreviations in some cases. So I'm going to walk through each of these subheadings, the blue characters, one at a time. The first one in every case is called the ref, or reference section, and this shows the latitude and longitude of the aerodrome, the geometric center. It shows you the location from the nearest community, in this case Sudbury, 11 miles northeast. It gives you the magnetic variation applicable at this location and when that was measured. It shows you the time zone that is in effect at this aerodrome versus universal coordinated time. And it gives you two references. The first one is standard time, and if daylight savings time is applicable for this location, it shows you the daylight savings time offset. It then shows you the aerodrome elevation in feet above sea level, and a number of details that aren't pertinent to drone pilots related to aviation charts and things like that. The OPR, or operator subsection of the CFS listing, is the most crucial part for drone pilots. This subsection identifies the aerodrome's operator and their contact phone number. The operator is your first contact point when seeking permission to fly near the aerodrome. They may pass you to someone else, but this is where you start. Note that if the aerodrome is in controlled airspace, you will also require a NAV Canada RPAS flight authorization request. The OPR subsection also identifies the aerodrome's status in what I like to call the hierarchy of life. In this case, the Sudbury Aerodrome is certified, indicating that it is an official airport. You can tell this because it says CERT. Other status codes are REG for registered and MIL for military aerodromes. Often military aerodromes simply say DND for Department of National Defense. The next subsection is PF, which is short for public facilities. And in this area, you'll see various codes for facilities like telephones and food that is found nearby the airport, either in the terminal or within a certain number of nautical miles. It's all encoded and frankly not very interesting for drone pilots. The next subsection is CUST, which is short for customs, and it details, again in a peculiar coded fashion, the customs facilities at the aerodrome. FLT-PLN is short for flight planning, and while this is not particularly interesting for drone pilots, you may see questions on your exam that focus in on information that's in this section. So the flight planning section references the NOTAM aerodrome to use, which is kind of a throwback to earlier times because the new NOTAM website accepts all aerodrome codes, not just the one that's listed in the CFS. It also includes the Flight Information Center to use for weather and flight planning. In this case, it points to London, Ontario, and it provides the contact information for that facility. WX is short for weather, and so the WX subsection here identifies the services that are available and their hours. In this case, it's showing the METAR and the TAF, the Terminal Aerodrome Forecast. Almost everything else in the CFS is cryptic and abbreviated, but the word services is spelled out in full. Don't ask me why. Again, this section is exclusively of interest to manned aircraft pilots. It provides the fuel details available at this aerodrome, the kinds of oil, S, which is short for service, and again coded to 1, 2, and 3. It does list the aircraft rescue and firefighting, or ARF, facilities that are available here, and other stuff that's pertinent to manned aircraft. If you are planning to fly near an aerodrome, and of course you're going to secure permission to do so if you're going to go ahead with that, it is important to understand the location and direction of the runways so that you can ascertain which direction aircraft are going to be landing and taking off. So this next section, the runway data section, and if it happens to be a heliport, it will have, instead of runway data, it will have heli data. And in some cases, they have both. But at any rate, it will have the runway information in terms of the runway number, the actual direction in parentheses after it. So for example, runway number 4 here, the actual direction is exactly 40 degrees. Now in this case, it's magnetic. But in the next case, if you notice, runway 12 is not actually 120 degrees, but it's 116 degrees. So this way you can tell with a little more precision exactly where these runways are oriented. The rest of the information in this section outlines the type of surface, such as asphalt, the information about load-bearing limits, all coded in there, day and night operation, winter conditions, and this sort of thing. If this facility also has a heliport, then the dimensions and surface type are indicated in this area as well. The next subsection is called lighting, which of course focuses in on the lighting systems, colors, and how they're controlled for each of the runways and approach systems, and also beacons and other sorts of lighting that would be of course pertinent for manned aircraft. The COM, or communications subsection, identifies various radio frequencies related to the aerodrome. It will also identify emergency phone numbers, including an emergency phone number for the control tower, if available. If you're monitoring aviation radio communications during your drone flight, this is where you can determine which frequencies to tune into. In particular, the MF, or mandatory frequency, or ATF, aerodrome traffic frequency, would be the best ones to choose, depending upon which one is listed. One detail in this section that is somehow hidden is this letter V shown in parentheses. A V like this indicates the emergency frequency is 121.5 MHz. You might also see a U here, meaning 243.0 MHz, or an E, indicating that either one of those frequencies can be used in emergencies. Not sure why they hide it like this, but there you go. Nav is for navigation, and this section identifies the various navigational aids such as direction beacons and distance measuring equipment and things like that applicable for this aerodrome. Really not applicable for drone use, and I've listed some of the acronyms that you might see in this section here. 2 more sections to go, so hang in there because these ones actually may be useful for drone pilots. The Pro section identifies special procedures that are applicable at this aerodrome. In this case, the Pro section identifies that right-hand circuits are to be used for runway 2230. The normal approach pattern at aerodromes is the left-hand circuit, as illustrated here, where the pilot will make a series of left-hand turns as he or she is approaching to land. When keeping an eye out for manned aircraft, it is very useful to know where they might be coming from, so this section will provide insights in the event of something exceptional. This section can also include procedures applicable to this aerodrome, such as noise restrictions. And if this aerodrome is a heliport, the Pro section will identify approach patterns for different helicopter classes. Last but not least is the Caution section. Generally, this section will outline items of concern for manned aircraft, but it may help you as a drone pilot to be aware of these so you're not taken by surprise by the actions of a manned aircraft. Whew, that was the last section in a typical CFS entry. Well, there we have it. How to read and understand CFS charts. If you found this video helpful, give me a big thumbs up down below and drop me a comment as well. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel and ring that bell for notifications of all my new videos. Thanks again for watching. See you again soon.